Adana stood frozen at the doorway, her worn savings book shaking in her hands. Years of cleaning, tutoring, and skipping meals, all saved for her future. But her father didn't blink when he said, "We used your savings on someone more worthy." Her breath cracked. Who? Before he could answer, Grandpa Kwame, quiet wheelchair-bound, lifted his head and whispered, "And who decides her worth? You." That one question didn't just break the room. It unraveled every lie Adana ever believed about her family. Adana burst through the door, her heart racing with excitement. After years of skipping meals, taking extra tutoring jobs, and saving every coin she could, she finally had enough money to apply to the design school she had dreamed of for as long as she could remember. She held her savings book tightly, imagining the day she would step into that school and start building her future. But the moment she opened it, her chest sank. The pages that should have held her hard-earned savings were empty. Confused and trembling, she looked at her father, expecting at least a hint of understanding or pride. Instead, he looked at her calmly, almost bored, and said, "We used your savings for Keenan's future. His future is more important." His words hit her like a thunderclap. No apology, no explanation, no flicker of regret, just entitlement, as if her years of sacrifice had meant nothing. Her eyes filled with tears, and she felt a wave of anger and betrayal crash over her. She couldn't understand how he could erase her dreams so easily. Grandpa Kwame, sitting quietly in his wheelchair in the corner, had been watching the entire scene. He clenched the armrest so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His face was calm, but his eyes were burning with a silent storm. He had always been the quiet one, never speaking up against the family's unfairness. But now, the weight of the injustice pressed heavily in the room, and even he could no longer remain untouched. Adana's excitement and hope had been shattered in a single moment, and the house felt colder than ever. She realized, with a sinking heart, that the people she loved most had chosen to value someone else's dreams over hers. And in that silence, she felt the first crack of doubt about everything she had ever believed about her family. Her father went on and on, trying to explain why Adana's money had been taken, speaking in calm, almost rehearsed tones, about how Keenan needed it more and how she should understand family priorities. Adana's chest tightened with every word. She wanted to scream, to tell him that nothing he said could ever make this right, but she also froze, shocked at how easily he had dismissed all her hard work. Then, in the quiet corner of the room, Grandpa Kwame cleared his throat. His voice was soft but firm, the kind of voice that made everyone lean in without realizing it. "Tell me, in this house, who measured her worth and found it less?" he asked. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and sharp, cutting through the excuses and lies like a knife. The room went completely still. Adana's father, who had been so confident just moments ago, suddenly looked smaller, unsure, his mouth opening and closing but no sound coming out. His usual authority faltered, replaced with a strange, nervous hesitation. Adana felt a shiver run down her spine. She had never seen her grandfather speak like this before. Grandpa Kwame had always been quiet, polite, almost invisible in family decisions, never challenging her parents openly, always letting things pass. And yet here he was, asking a question that none of them could answer. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. And for the first time, Adana felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her. It was as if her grandfather's words had pulled back a curtain she hadn't even realized was hiding the truth. She saw the doubt in her father's eyes, the tension in her stepmother's shoulders, and for the first time, she realized that maybe she wasn't completely powerless in her own house. Grandpa's question didn't just confront her parents. It shook the entire room, exposing every hidden injustice that had been quietly building over the years. Adana felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear, because she knew her parents could lash out. Relief, because someone she loved had finally acknowledged her pain, finally saw what she had endured. In that moment, the quiet strength of her grandfather became a lifeline, and Adana felt that, for the first time, the scales of power in the house had shifted ever so slightly. The question had done more than speak. It had opened a crack in the wall of lies, and Adana could feel the truth starting to seep through. Late that night, just as Adana was trying to calm her racing thoughts, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it slowly and saw Grandpa Kwame standing there, his hands trembling slightly, his eyes full of worry and something heavier, regret. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her, and she could see the weight of years pressing on his shoulders. Then he stepped inside and lowered himself into the chair by her bed. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but every word carried the weight of truth. He told her that he had watched silently for years as her parents took everything she worked for. Her earnings from tutoring, her scholarship money, even gifts that were meant to encourage her dreams, and quietly redirected it all to her younger half-brother, Keenan. Every sacrifice she had made, every sleepless night she had endured, every coin she had saved, he admitted, had been taken and used without her knowledge. Adana felt a mix of shock, anger, and hurt swell inside her. She wanted to shout, to cry, to shake him for not stopping it sooner, but she also felt his pain. Grandpa Kwame's hands shook as he continued, explaining that he had been too afraid to speak up before. Her parents were strict and controlling, and he feared that if he tried to challenge them, they would throw him out of the house, leave him powerless, and make things worse for Adana. The room was silent except for the sound of their quiet breaths. Then, after a long pause, he looked straight at her and said, his voice firmer now, carrying determination that had been buried for too long, "This injustice ends now." Those words hit her in a way nothing else had. For the first time, she felt that she wasn't alone, that someone who truly cared about her believed in her worth, someone who understood how much she had been hurt. The fear she had carried for years slowly began to fade, replaced by a spark of hope. Her grandfather, who had seemed powerless and silent for so long, was now her ally, and together, she could finally confront the unfairness that had stolen so much from her. In that quiet, small room, Adana realized that the first step toward taking back her life had begun. Grandpa Kwame had carried the truth for years, and now he had chosen to share it, to fight with her instead of letting silence rule. It felt like a door opening after years of being closed, and Adana knew that nothing would ever feel the same again. Grandpa Kwame reached into the pocket of his old coat and pulled out a small, worn envelope. It looked ordinary, but the way he held it made Adana's heart skip a beat. "I've kept this for a long time," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "It's time you see it." She took it from him with shaking hands, feeling the weight of the paper inside, as if it carried not just words but her entire future. Carefully, she opened the envelope, and inside was a legal document, official, stamped, undeniable. Her eyes widened as she read the words. She was the rightful heir to her late grandmother's land and trust, property and money that her parents had hidden from her for years, hoping to control her life and her choices. Adana sank onto the edge of her bed, clutching the paper, tears streaming down her face. She felt a rush of emotions all at once, shock, disbelief, relief, and a trembling sense of power she had never known she could have. For years, she had believed that her dreams and sacrifices meant nothing to her parents, that she would always be trapped, always serving someone else's vision for her life. But now, everything had changed in a single moment. Grandpa sat beside her, his own eyes glistening with tears. "Your grandmother wanted you to rise, Adana, not serve," he said softly, his words cutting through the years of pain and injustice. He explained how her grandmother had always believed in her, had always wanted her to have a life full of choices, creativity, and freedom. Her parents had buried this truth to keep her under their control, but Grandpa had safeguarded it in secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Adana pressed the document to her chest, feeling a strange mix of grief for the time lost and hope for the life she could finally claim. She realized that every small effort, every sacrifice she had made, every moment of frustration and struggle, had led her to this moment. Grandpa held her hand tightly, and she could feel his unwavering support and love, something her parents had never truly given. In that quiet, small room, surrounded by the shadows of the night, Adana understood the power she had carried within her all along, power that no one could take away anymore. The envelope wasn't just paper. It was a key, a chance, a promise that she could finally step into the life she deserved. And as she looked up at her grandfather, she saw pride, love, and belief in her eyes. And for the first time in her life, Adana allowed herself to imagine a future where she was free, where she could rise, create, and live for herself, not for anyone else. That one envelope had changed everything, and she knew nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, Adana woke with a mix of determination and fear. She had rehearsed her words in her mind, but nothing could prepare her for the moment she stepped into the living room. where her parents were already having breakfast. She held the envelope tightly in her hand, feeling its weight like a shield. Her stepmother noticed her first and forced a smile. "Good morning, Adana," she said, but there was a sharpness in her voice. Adana didn't answer. Instead, she looked directly at her father, her chest tight with anger and hurt. "I want answers," she said quietly, but with a strength that made them both shift in their seats. Her stepmother jumped in first, speaking fast, twisting the truth. She said Adana was imagining things, that she must be mistaken about the money and the savings. She tried to make it sound like Adana was overreacting, even blaming her for being careless with her own finances. Her father nodded along, adding that she must have misunderstood, that she was reading too much into it, and that he had only done what he thought was best. Adana felt the familiar sting of betrayal, but she didn't flinch. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled the envelope from her bag and placed it on the table in front of them. The legal document sat there, clear and undeniable. She watched as their faces changed, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally, a pale, drained look that made her chest tighten with a mixture of triumph and relief. "This proves everything," she said calmly, her voice steady. Her stepmother's mouth opened, closed, and opened again, searching for a lie, but none could come. Her father's usual calmness cracked, his eyes darting around, unsure of how to respond. Before anyone could speak again, Grandpa Kwame wheeled himself into the room, his hands firm on the armrests. His eyes were fixed on them, and his voice was steady and unwavering. "If she leaves," he said, his tone carrying both authority and warning, "I leave too." The house seemed to hold its breath. His words hung in the air like thunder, heavy and impossible to ignore. The room went silent, and even the walls seemed to listen. Adana felt a rush of relief and power. For the first time, she realized she wasn't alone in this fight. The balance had shifted. Her parents, who had controlled her life for so long, now had to face the consequences of their actions. The fear, the threats, and the lies that had once ruled the house felt weaker, almost powerless, in the presence of the truth and the unwavering support of her grandfather. And in that moment, Adana knew that whatever happened next, she had already taken the first real step toward reclaiming her life. Adana moved quietly through the house, helping Grandpa Kwame pack a few of his things into a small bag. Each item he chose seemed to carry a memory, and she could see the sadness in his eyes as he folded his worn sweaters and carefully placed his books in the bag. Her parents hovered nearby, their faces twisted with shock and anger, unable to believe she was actually leaving with him. Her stepmother started pleading, her voice trembling, promising everything, saying she would give Adana the freedom she wanted, begging her to stay. Her father's tone turned sharper, threatening her with consequences, reminding her of the house, the land, and everything they claimed she owed them. Their words bounced off her like wind against a wall. She had heard them all before, and none of it could stop what she had finally decided. Adana felt a deep calm settle inside her, as she realized she didn't need their approval anymore. She wasn't walking away in anger or revenge. She was walking away for herself, for the life she had always deserved. Grandpa Kwame's hand rested on hers as they moved toward the door, steady and reassuring. "We're doing the right thing," he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet strength. Adana looked at him, feeling the warmth of his support, and for the first time in years, she felt safe, truly safe, from the controlling grip of her parents. Outside, the air felt fresher than it had in years, as if the world itself was welcoming her freedom. They stepped down the porch together, each footstep leaving behind the weight of the past. Grandpa turned to her with a small smile, a twinkle of hope in his eyes. "I know someone who can help you," he said. "An old friend of mine, Cato, an architect. He owes me a favor, and he can guide your career. You'll have the chance to finally build something of your own." Adana's heart leapt at the thought. After all the years of being dismissed, of watching her dreams stolen, there was finally a path forward. Someone willing to see her talent, to help her grow. She didn't look back at the house, at her parents, at their begging or their threats. She knew that nothing inside could stop her anymore. The weight of their control, their lies, and their false promises was gone. She had chosen herself, and with Grandpa by her side, she felt stronger than ever. Together, they walked toward a future that had been waiting for her all along. One where she could finally rise without permission, without guilt, and without anyone trying to hold her back. For the first time, Freedom didn't feel frightening. It felt like home. Adana stepped into Kato's studio and felt as if she had entered a completely new world. The walls were lined with sketches, models and blueprints, and the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibilities. For the first time in her life, she wasn't in a place where her talent was dismissed or mocked. She held her portfolio tightly, feeling nervous, but the moment she showed her drawings, the response was nothing like she had ever experienced at home. Kato leaned over her sketches, examining each line, each design with careful attention. "These are amazing," he said, his voice genuine and warm. "You have a vision that most people would never see." Adana felt her chest swell with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Nobody had ever spoken to her like that before. Never praised her for her creativity or taken her ideas seriously. His team, a group of young designers and architects, gathered around, giving her nods and smiles that made her feel like she truly belonged. They asked questions, offered suggestions, and treated her opinions with respect. It was intoxicating, this feeling of being seen for who she really was, not for what her parents wanted her to be. Grandpa Kwame stood quietly in the corner, watching her. His eyes followed every small movement, every shy smile that crept onto her face. With each compliment and every nod of approval from Kato and his team, Adana's shoulders straightened, her voice grew steadier, and her confidence blossomed in a way it never had at home. She began to imagine herself working here, creating designs that people would admire, and realizing that her dreams were not only valid, they were possible. Grandpa's chest swelled with pride, though he tried to hide it behind his calm demeanor. Seeing Adana take her first steps into a world that had always seemed unreachable filled him with joy. Every day, her confidence grew. She stayed longer in the studio, sketching new ideas, asking questions, and learning more than she had ever thought possible. Each time she left, she felt a little taller, a little stronger, and a little more like the person she had always wanted to be. In this new world, Adana could breathe. She could create. She could finally be seen, respected, and valued for her talent. And while the road ahead would still take effort, she no longer feared failure or rejection. With Kato's mentorship and her grandfather's unwavering support, she realized she had entered a place where her dreams could finally take shape, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe that she truly belonged. While Adana was busy at the studio, pouring her heart into her first real design project, the world she had left behind began to crumble. Her parents had finally discovered that the land and trust they had buried and tried to keep secret were now legally hers. Panic and anger rippled through the house as they realized their control was gone. They scrambled to find ways to challenge the legal transfer, calling lawyers, digging through old documents, and even trying to bribe officials. But just as they thought they might regain some power, Grandpa Kwame stepped in. Calm, steady, and unshakable, he presented a complete record of every unfair act they had committed over the years. The money they had taken from Adana, the scholarships they had redirected, the gifts they had hidden. Each page was a reminder of the lies and manipulation they had built their lives on, and it left them powerless. Adana, meanwhile, did not attend the hearing. She had no interest in facing them in court, no desire to argue or fight for what was already hers. She was busy, alive, and focused on her future, sketching, presenting, and learning with people who truly valued her talent. Her absence was a quiet, cutting statement. Her parents' attempts to regain control failed not because of her anger, but because she simply had moved on. Every effort they made to intimidate, manipulate, or reclaim what they had tried to steal only reminded them of what they had lost: her respect, her presence, her loyalty. Sitting in the studio, Adana felt the difference clearly. The house that had once been her prison of rules, lies, and theft was collapsing without her lifting a finger. Her parents were forced to watch as her life moved forward without them, proof that their power had always been an illusion. The absence of confrontation, the refusal to fight, hurt them more than any revenge could have. They were left with the bitter reality that while they had spent years trying to control her, she had quietly taken back everything that mattered, and she was thriving. Grandpa watched from the sidelines, proud and relieved. He had seen the slow, painful unraveling of their deception and knew that Adana's focus, talent, and dignity were doing what anger or vengeance never could. The house built on lies was crumbling, not with noise or fury, but with quiet truth and unstoppable progress. And Adana was standing far away from it, alive, free, and finally untouchable. Months later, Adana found herself standing in a bright, bustling city hall filled with designers, artists, and visitors from all over. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with excitement. She had been invited to showcase her work at a major exhibition, something she had dreamed of for years, but never thought would actually happen. Her drawings, her models, her ideas, everything she had poured her heart into, were finally being seen, appreciated, and celebrated. From the corner of her eye, she noticed figures slipping quietly into the crowd. Her stomach tightened as she realized her parents had come, hiding among the visitors, thinking she might fail or stumble under the attention. They had expected to see disappointment, to feel a sense of control once again, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality unfolding. Cato's international partners approached her with admiration, offering her a contract, promising collaboration and opportunities she had only imagined in her wildest dreams. The words made her chest swell with pride. She could feel the weight of years of hard work, sacrifice, and struggle lifting, replaced by a sense of accomplishment she had earned entirely on her own. Her parents watched from a distance, frozen. Their faces went pale as they realized their daughter, the one they had dismissed, stolen from, and tried to control, was now standing in the spotlight, thriving beyond anything they had ever imagined. After the applause settled, her father, desperate to regain some connection, stepped forward. His voice trembled slightly as he said, "We didn't mean to hurt you. You're still our daughter." Adana's eyes met his, and for a moment, a flicker of old memories crossed her mind, the dreams she had shared with him, the trust she had given. But she remembered the years of lies, of stolen savings, of ignored efforts, and of broken trust. She took a slow, deliberate step back, holding the contract and her portfolio tightly. Her voice was calm, soft, but filled with quiet authority as she whispered, "You lost that right the day you stole my future." The words didn't need anger or shouting. They carried the weight of truth, final and undeniable. Her parents stood there, speechless, as the crowd around her continued to celebrate her talent. In that moment, Adana realized the full power of her success. She hadn't needed their approval, their understanding, or even their presence. Her hard work, determination, and belief in herself had brought her here. And as she turned back to Cato and the partners, smiling at the future she was about to create, she felt lighter, stronger, and completely free. The past, the pain, and the people who doubted her no longer had any hold. She had walked back into the world she deserved, and this time, she was the one in control. Adana stood in the doorway of her new home, taking a deep breath of the fresh morning air. It was modest, warm, and filled with sunlight that streamed through the windows, lighting up the small living room where Grandpa Kwame had already settled into his favorite chair. There were no fancy signs, no crowds, no fanfare, just peace. For the first time in her life, she felt truly at home, a place where she could breathe, create, and live without fear of judgment or control. Every morning, she set up her easel by the window, watching the city wake up as she painted, colors spilling across the canvas as freely as her dreams once held inside her. Grandpa sat beside her, telling stories from his youth, laughing softly, sharing memories that made her feel grounded and loved. Her success was growing quietly, steadily, not for anyone else, not for attention, awards, or validation, but because she had earned it with her own hands and her own heart. People occasionally asked her how she had made it, how she had turned her life around after all the obstacles and betrayal. She would smile softly and say, "The day I stopped needing permission to exist, everything changed." It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about claiming the life that had always been hers. She didn't destroy her family, didn't try to hurt them, didn't seek to punish them. She simply outgrew the version of life they had tried to trap her in, leaving behind their control, their lies, and their doubts. And in that calm, quiet space, with her grandfather smiling beside her and her own hands shaping her future, Adana realized that this was the ending that belonged to her alone, the one they never saw coming. She was free, whole, and finally in control of her own story, living a life built on love, resilience, and her own determination. Every brushstroke, every choice, every quiet moment of joy was a testament to her strength. The house wasn't just a home. It was her victory, her safe place, a proof that she could rise without anyone's permission and thrive in her own light. And as the sun spilled across her canvases, She knew she had found something far greater than wealth, fame, or approval. She had found herself.